Okay, so these videos have turned out to be fairly popular, so I'm going to keep making them. So this is a look at another old GPU. So this one's kind of special. This is a NVIDIA GeForce GTX 295. So this is so the GeForce 200 series was a kind of a whole line of cards made similar to say the RTX 4000 series. They went for I think the early ones went on the market somewhere around early mid 2008. This would have been the very last card of the series. This was the last highest end card that was released as kind of the last dying gasp of this of this. I guess I might be wrong on that. Let me take a look here. So I got a monitor running here. So I'd have to look at when, I don't want to try to pull it up right now. I'd have to look at when GeForce GTX 400 series came out. I think it might have been, I think 200 series may have had 2 years. I think they started coming out like early mid '08. And I think the new generation cards were like early to mid 2010, something like that. So these are DirectX 10 only. So that was the next generation cards after this, which are what I would consider the next generation of cards. So the cards that came after these, this was basically the apex of the technology that we were using for gaming from like the early 2000s to 2010. I mean, I know it's a little messier than that, but that's kind of the simplistic way I can put it. The next generation that came after these were like 2010 to, yeah, realistically, even though RTX is kind of a new thing, I would say cards like the GTX 10 series are really kind of the start of the next generation after that. There's quite a performance boost and capability boost. I don't want to just describe it in terms of DirectX, but it's partly that. I guess in that respect, you'd probably say like pretty much full DirectX 12 game compatibility for the most part would have started with the GTX 900 series. I don't even know what the corresponding AMD is. They were a little messy back then. I'm thinking, crap, I don't know. Let's focus on this though. So this is, in my opinion, the first 2 GPU card that NVIDIA created that actually like worked. They had a couple before this. They had the first one I think they did was the GTX 7950 X2, I think is what they called it, which was literally 2 GTX 7950s, like 2 complete cards just sandwiched together into a 2 slot form factor. So, because back then the cards were single slot, so it was 2 single slot cards in just a package. Then they did, I think the next one they did, at least that NVIDIA did officially. I know back then there were some unofficials, but the next one after that was the GTX 9800 GX2, and I actually have one of those. I did a video on it a bit back. In my opinion, it was a terrible card. The performance didn't scale, and it was also it was an unreliable card, in my opinion. I've had several of them in my possession. Most of them were defective. Even early on, even back in the day, it was always a card that was on my avoid list because I never really saw them as a non-problematic item. They always had issues. They were a problematic card. These, however, worked. So what this is actually, you know what? This one, my shroud is broken, so I can pull the shroud off. This one might even still be dirty. You might hear some cracking because, oh, can I do it without breaking anything else? Oh, I can. Cool. So this is, I can't remember what they did with the 9800 GX2, but I think this might be the first one where it actually had 2 GPU dies on one PCB, so you can actually see each of these separate heat sinks, and it's a blower card, but the blower fan is in the center. The reason it's in the center is because it's throwing air to both. So I believe you're throwing air out that way and that way. I don't know what that did to cooling. I wasn't into, I didn't have the money for high-end parts like this back in the day, so I didn't really pay attention much to the marketing and the back then we didn't have, big YouTube outlets and stuff, Gamers Nexus, stuff like that to do the kind of testing they do today. So you really just had articles in like PC magazines and stuff back in the day. But so I don't know what the consensus was back in the day on cooling on these, honestly. I've got one that works. It's actually, I don't know where it is, but I have two of these, a defective one and this one. I'm using this one because I'm getting my hands all over it, so there's no reason to use the working one for that. But yeah, there's two GPUs. There's one under here and there's one under here. And it was the first card, I believe, that did that. And these were essentially two GTX 275s. So it's not, unfortunately, it's not two of the higher end GTX 290, or I'm sorry, GTX 285s. That would have been pretty rad. I bet they couldn't cool that though. I bet it was a cooling decision, because I bet it would have been virtually impossible to cool that card. And that card, so this card was kind of this was the fastest total package at the time. Because it did, my experience when I've tested it, it did scale fairly well. But the GTX 285 was the fastest single card, and two GTX 285s in SLI would be faster than this. I believe also more expensive. I think they were like I don't know, $600, $700, $800 back in the day. The 285 was a kind of a monster in its day, just like this, but they were kind of for two groups of people. These could be quad SLI'd. So when you set them up, if you put two of them in, you can connect them by SLI. It is quad SLI though, and quad SLI is known to not be really that efficient. I think a lot of the times what you do is you do triple SLI, and then the fourth card would be physics, something like that. This particular unit is a BFG shroud unit, but and also I believe they had a version 1 and a version 2. This is the more reliable version. I believe the version 2 may have been a two cards in one configuration, where it was literally two cards just sandwiched together, I believe. If I remember correctly, this was the one that you wanted though. They were more robust and reliable, because it's a better option to have a long card with two dies than to sandwich two PCBs. I've always found that cards that are the two cards sandwiched together configuration, I think they just cook themselves. It's just too much heat sandwiched together, and it's not a good idea. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that look at this. It was a monster back in the day. I could never afford it. It looks like, actually though, I'm looking at the Tech Power Up on it. It was only $499 at initial launch, which is interesting. I mean, $499 is not, that was, what was that, 2009? So 12, 13, 14, 15, 16? 16 years ago? I don't know, something like that. A while ago. It was a really, really long while ago. So that money isn't the same today as, I don't know what the exact rates is, but I'm guessing that would be more like, I don't know, $800 or $900, at least $700 or $800 in today's money would be my guess. So it's not quite as cheap as $499 makes it sound, but it is less expensive than today's card. These are also less complicated than today's cards too. They're just not as what we expected from our cards back then. This is something a lot of people lose touch of when they talk about GPU pricing and how it's more expensive today. What we expect, it's not just a question of the technology has advanced. Overall, the total package of things that we expected a video card to do back in the day, it just wasn't as big. We didn't expect nearly as much. So, But anyway, that's a topic for a different discussion. I hope you guys found this look at the GTX 295 to be interesting and, I don't know, necessarily informative, but a nice look down memory lane. So thanks for watching the video.